Good morning, and thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Butts-Chester. You know what I like to do on my show. I want to enlighten you. I want to inspire you. I want to empower you to become your best self. Now, Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today we want to get you fired up about this opportunity to discuss the book, I Know a Blessing When I See One. Now, this is a story about how the effects of what's going on in our country and in our society today are touching our personal lives. You know, lessons learned through the life of Christ. What a beautiful way to put that. My guest today is Pastor Clifton Jones Jr., and I am excited to have him on. Let me tell you a little bit more about Pastor Jones. He was born in the state of Louisiana, in the city of New Orleans, and currently resides in the city of Baton Rouge. The novel I Know a Blessing When I See One is his first published book. Raised in rural Louisiana, his education first began in the church. He is married to his lovely wife of 20 years, Veronica. They have 5 children and a host of grandchildren. They are the founding pastor and assistant pastor of the United Sons and Daughters of God Ministries. Now, you know what I'm going to tell you to do now. Go on. Get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee, or get your tea, because we are about to get started. Good morning, Pastor. Thank you so much for being on with me today.
Good morning, Dr. Angela. So glad to be with you.
Now, I love the title of your book, but before we get into that, I always spend a little bit of time with my guests first, and just kind of to give our listening audience an opportunity to know a little bit more about you. So the one question that I ask everybody, and that is, Pastor Jones, what makes you, Clifton, what makes you you? What have you experienced that you've been able to bring along the journey thus far?
Wow. What a question. What a question, Doc. Okay.
Everybody
really?
always has that reaction. They're like, oh, wow, that's loaded. I don't know what to say. And it's like, but I love whatever answer you give is always an authentic answer, be it, grandmother taught you an awesome lesson, you went to college but you hated it, and that's why you wrote, but whatever you have to say is going to be the best answer ever. So I give you the floor back.
Thank you. Well, first of all, as I was saying in the bio, I am from rural Louisiana, and I came up during a time of the early 70s. I'm more of a 70s child, even though I was born in the 60s. Mm-hmm. But I've always lovingly said that I am kind of last of the old school and first of the new. So I'm like a twilight kid, so to speak, regarding society. Mm-hmm. And in regards to just being who I am, lessons learned, things that I have gathered over the last 50 years of my life is that, change is apparent. Nothing happens without change. We cease to exist without change. And I've seen a lot of change. I've been a part of a lot of change. I've watched our country grow, even in the rural areas where I'm from. And here we are, even now, continuing to grow. And as a person, I've been molded by growth. I've been molded by a mother who was a teacher, who graduated from Southern University and was a teacher and a founding member of preschools in Louisiana. I was a son of a father who was actually the last form of a sharecropper, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And, I've seen both. I've seen a time when education was pressed real hard towards me. At the same time, I understood the aspects of having to be in an actual field at a very young age to earn money, to buy things and school clothes and what have you, So I've been on both sides.
Mm-hmm. And, thank you so much for giving us that perspective, because I talk many times as well about the lessons that my family has taught me. My grandparents, my paternal grandparents, were all born very early in the 1900s, 1903 and 1907. So when we talk about pandemics, they were becoming adults when the 1918 flu rolled around, when we went through the Great Depression, and all of the things that have happened, the major things that have happened in our country. My parents are kind of like you. They were adults during that civil rights time, where the country was deciding which side it was going to be on. I'm born in the 70s, so that makes me an 80s baby, and being able to look back at all that my family, and I use that in a very large sense, all of the community of family, of all that has been accomplished, everything that has been done.
Exactly.
And how it's now, my generation's turn to pass that on to the next. And like you said, the lessons learned. I mean, it is a beautiful thing that we have been able to share. I love that intro. Now, see, I think you very well may have given us the best one thus far, Pastor. I like that. I like that you were able to blend that in. I love it. Now,
hey.
Speaking of segues, the next is about the title. Now, I love the title. I know a blessing when I see one. Did you find that title came to you first, or did it develop out of your writings? How did you decide upon that title?
Now, Angela, I'm going to be completely honest. A lot of people to this day have problems with this answer that I'm about to give you, but it's simply the truth. Mm-hmm. I'm a man of faith as yourself, as you are a woman of God. And to be frank with you, what happened was I was in the midst of going through some basic tribulations and trials in my life at that time in my ministry. And God led me to a 21-day fast.
Uh-huh.
And and the way I fast, I've always fasted, was when I do such a fast, it's strictly, water, and that's basically it. Mm-hmm. And at the end, the book was birthed, including the title, I Know a Blessing When I See One.
Mm-hmm.
So I tell folks just as simply as I can put it, what it was, God gave me the title, but it literally was procured through the experiences that I saw, that I was a part of, and that I became literally engrafted to in our society in Louisiana and the South as a whole. And the idea just came forth, and the story was born.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love it. I tell everyone that we have to start sharing these God moments with other people. We have to start letting people know that it is not about our power. It is not about our own doing, but that God comes in and very gently sometimes just says, boop, there you go. And you go, what? That is amazing. Thank you. And you know that is just a God moment. I love that. I love that. Now, for someone who says, you know what, Pastor, I understand, and you know a blessing when you see one, yeah, it's a pandemic out there. It's stuff going on. How do I take your title and make that apply to what's going on in the world right now? What's your suggestion to that person?
Well, when I wrote the book, Angela, first of all, I had no idea, even after I finished the book, that we would be at this point in our times right now. No one did. No one can tell the future. But even as I go through my book, just preparing to sit down with you, one of the things that literally shocked me, even as the writer, is that how close it parallels the time that are fictitiously brought forth in the book
Mm-hmm.
into what's going on right now in our lives. People are tired. People are tired of being pushed down, pushed back. And just as it was in the 60s, so is it now.
Yeah.
And the thing that we're able to grab hold through this book is to see that you have to be able to recognize your rose in your garden.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be able to recognize your lily in your valley, literally. Mm-hmm. You have to be the one to recognize your blessing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so many times, so many times, we get caught up in the rigmarole of our sicknesses, in this case, our pandemics, and the situations of our civil unrest that we're facing right now, and we feel so small. We feel so insignificant in it all, and we literally wonder, does anybody hear me? Does God even hear me?
Yeah.
And we have to be reminded that He said, I would never leave you nor forsake you.
Mm-hmm.
And that allows us to begin to search out the blessing, begin to search for His presence. And once we receive, the Bible says He is Jehovah Shammah, God our presence. And once we seek Him in the presence of who He is, He begins to reveal to us the blessings, not just generalized, but our personal blessing, that He has our name stamped on them. I didn't want to get too preachy. I'm sorry.
No. That was a perfect answer. And when you talk about being in His presence, I think it's so appropriate, because during this time of quarantine is a perfect time for us to be in His presence. We are off of the rat wheel. For many people, it's not the routine of, wake up, go to work, come home, eat, go to sleep, wake up, go to work, over and over. Oh, yeah, by the way, love on your spouse, kiss your kids, and, go back to the rat wheel. But now we have an opportunity to really ask ourselves, what's important? What are we doing? Do we have time to do it better, to change something that we were doing incorrectly before, and get it right while we're dealing with this pandemic? That was a great answer. I've told many people, hit the reset button. Spend some more time with those people that are important. Though we can't do it physically, we now have, a FaceTime and just cell phones are so convenient. You can be anywhere and pick up the phone and reach out to someone and spend time. Use them to read your Bible, while you're relaxing on your balcony because we can't go to work anymore or whatever. So absolutely great answer, Pastor. Now it is time for us to go to break. But before we do, if you could please remind everyone, what is the title of your book? Where can we pick up a copy? And how do we stay in contact with you?
Yes, sure, Dr. Angela. The book's title is I Know a Blessing When I See One. And you can find it right now on Amazon Books, as well as Barnes & Noble. If you desire to contact me, my email address through our church is Jones Clifton Jr., 2, at gmail.com. That's Jones Clifton Jr., 2 at email.com.
Alrighty, listeners, now you know where you can pick up a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you so much for spending time with me here on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I'm your host, Dr. Angela Chester. My guest today is Pastor Clifton Jones Jr., and we're talking about his book, I Know a Blessing When I See One. Now, I know that there's somebody out there, too, who can raise their hand and have that testimony as well. You better see your blessing when it's out there and not deny that God is moving and working in your life. Now, Pastor, one of the questions that I like to ask people is about the writing process. in particular. So my next question for you is, was the book easy to write? Did you find that it kind of just flowed out of you? Did you have conversations with God as you were writing the book? What was your process?
Well, Dr. Angela, it's a interesting, marveling process because, as I spoke earlier, I was in the midst of an actual fast when the ideas began to churn out of me, so to speak. And one of the things that was interesting was that God takes our personal experiences, at least he does with me, and he'll take those personal experiences and even some of the stories that we heard and the things that we witnessed and begin to sort of meld them all together into ideas and into stories. And that's literally what happened. And it's quite simple for me to write like that. It's just literally a gift from him to remember and just see it on paper.
I love that. I love that. Now, for someone who decides to pick up a copy of your book, would you suggest to them that they read it from cover to cover? That person who likes to just pick up a book and randomly start reading, is it okay for them to do that? What's your suggestion?
I would literally tell people, start from cover to cover and just go at it. Because I believe that there's a special spark as we read, and as we get into it, it's like a good locomotion. It's a good locomotive. It's not a fast train. It's not a speedster. It begins slow coming out of the station. But once it gets to rolling, it's going to pack a punch.
I love that analogy, and I think that many people have kind of forgotten about that. I mean, nobody messes with a train. When you see the train coming, you don't say, "Oh, well, it had a slow start. Let me stand here." No, you want to go with it. You go, "Hey, take me along too." You are so right about that. What a great way to explain that. Now, when you were sharing the wisdom, the advice, the instruction, the message with to the reader in your book, did you find that you place them there quite simply, out in the open, really easy for people to pick up? Did you mix it up a little bit and make some of them where people were forced to kind of go a little deeper within themselves to be able to pull out the message? How did you display your messages along the way in your book?
Well, one of the things that I've always looked for, because I'm an avid reader, and you had to be able to really hold my attention and cause me to literally see the whole thing as if I were watching a movie in my own mind. And as I prepared the book and as I would write it out, I literally would have tests. I had friends and close associates come forth who would be unbiased and literally read the material, and they would literally come back and tell me as if they said, I was right there. I could see that. And I think that's so important in the way I write. I want the reader to be able to say, I see that.
Yeah.
I see it. Oh, let me see what the next thing is going to happen. Let me see how they're reacting. There's a couple of confrontations in the book that you'll see between the characters, between Sheila and between the Mrs. Jacobs and so forth. I'm not going to give too much away. And then you'll be like, girl, you told, I would have never told, I would have told her, So, that's the kind of writing I do, because a lot of people are like, Pastor, this book is not just church. You mean you really know? I say, yeah, because we don't just live church.
Right.
We live lives.
That's true. I love that, and I'm so glad that you said that, because that was going to be my next question for you. Is that so many times when we do have people on that are in ministry, people think that the book is only good for someone who is a churched person. But if I hear you correctly, you're saying you wrote this book for anyone who wants to pick up a copy, the churched and the unchurched as well.
If an individual likes to read, and an individual is looking for a fresh new story regarding who we are as a people, regarding our struggle, and even regarding the hopes as well as the despairs that we go through, and how it all wraps around and brings us to a brand new defined end, they love this book.
I love it. I love it. Now, with everything kind of not the way that we thought the year 2020 was going to go, but instead going the way that it is at present, I usually ask people, are you going on book tour? Are you jet-setting around our great country to share your book? So I'm just going to ask in a very, very broad way, what are your next steps as far as your book is concerned regarding your writing? What are you doing next, Pastor?
Well, actually, I have several irons in the fire, so to speak. The book itself is actually part one of a continued story, and that I'm writing now. I'm working on part two, which is simply called Crushed But Still Blessed. So getting people ready. It's going to be a very interesting fire-filled drama that's just like the first novel left you almost on a cliff. I'm going to fly you off the cliff, and we're going to go a little higher and find something else to do. And it's going to be interesting. And at the same time, I'm working on a manifesto for the body of believers who are going through financial issues and everything, especially right now, which fits the situation.
Right.
And, of course, I have a very special project called The Lessons Learned Through Life in Christ Jesus, which will be released within the next couple of months.
Well, you'll definitely, invitation being given now, have to come back and share that with us. I'm sure our listeners would love to hear about the follow-up book that are coming out. I love that. Now, so many times we talk about being a successful person and what that looks like in our various industries. For so many people, being successful means that they have their dream car, they live in a certain type of home or in a certain community. But when it comes to literary success, it may look different to each individual person. What does literary success, in your words, what does that look like, or how should we understand what that term means to you?
Well, I think, and this is based upon what I believe as well, that your success as an author or as a writer, however you decide to deem it, is really based upon what you're expecting. Some people expect the red carpet treatment. Some people expect to be oohed and ahed everywhere they go. Some people are happy with doing simple book signings at the local neighborhood bookstore and the library. Me personally, and I'm just very frank. Me personally, I'm satisfied in understanding that success is to know that people have read my books, have understood what I'm trying to say, and literally can move on from it with a hope.
Yeah. I have to agree with you. I have to agree with you on that one. Now, typical question that authors get asked, and that is, if you could tell your younger self something about your future writing self, is there anything that you think that you need to tell you would have told your younger self?
don't procrastinate so much. Do not procrastinate so much. Oh, my goodness, that has been my wall. If there's anything that's always been a hindrance to me in regards to my writing, is just that. Just to briefly share, I'm an avid believer of every word in the Bible. I literally believe that every word has purpose, and it's not figurative, but it's actually a word that you can use in your life. And I stand on a particular scripture, Angela, that says this: for he has given us the ability to gain wealth. So that tells me that he's given us gifts. He's given us skills that we can be developed in even from our youth. I wrote my first play in the 8th grade, and they act the whole play out before the school. So it didn't just start, like yesterday. I've been writing a while. But instead of embracing it like I should have years ago, it took a while to just begin to listen to God say, hey, I've given you a skill. What are you going to do with it? So that's my thing. That's been my one thing that I could change in regards to being the person that I am as a writer. I stop procrastinating, stop watch other people to get in your ear, stop allowing, I hate to say this, but the naysayers, and as we say in the modern times, the player haters and all that. You gotta stop letting everybody tell you that this is not for you, or that's not what you do. You don't have time for that. You need to, Angela, as a black man in the South, in our day and age right now, one of the things that we have always told, we need to try to basically concentrate on making the living, making ends meet, building success. We don't have time to chase dreams. We don't have time to do the things that we truly desire to do. We have to be able to, and they use this word so much, sacrifice.
Yeah.
So.
I tell you, you are giving such wisdom, because let me tell you, I have heard people tell people that, you need to stop. What are you doing? That's crazy. You shouldn't want to go that way. You want to write a book, or you want to write a play, or you want to do, something that isn't, I like to say, in the box. How we're always telling people to think outside of the box. They make people think that you only have to continue to do those things that are on the pre-approved checklist for their life, and not understand that God has given each and every one of us a purpose, a goal, a vision, and a dream. And if we have been called to do such a thing, perhaps it's not for them, but it most definitely is for you. So, Pastor, thank you for reminding people that, think outside that box. Do what God has told you that you need to do. I love it. And what a great way to end today's show. Pastor Clifton Jones Jr., thank you so much for spending time with us here on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. Before I let you go, though, if you could please remind everyone one last time, what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy? And how do we stay in contact with you?
Of course. The title is I Know a Blessing When I See One. And you can find us at Barnes & Noble and, of course, Amazon.com. And you can contact me through Gmail or email, as you would say, Jones Clifton Jr. 2 at gmail.com. That's Jones Clifton Jr. 2 at gmail.com. Hope to hear from you guys.
I love it. I love it. Thank you again, Pastor, for being on the show today.
Thank you.
And listeners, thank you for spending some time with us as well. We hope that we have enlightened you, inspired you, and empowered you to be your best self. As always, may the Lord continue to shine his face upon you. May you receive his grace and his mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, remember that you are blessed in the Lord. Have a great day, everyone. Good morning, and thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Chester. You know what I like to do on the show. We want to enlighten you. We want to inspire you. We want to empower you to become your best self. Now, the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And I don't know about you, but I'm so glad that Scripture reminds us of that. Well, today my guest is Richard Cody, and we are talking about his book, Perfect Witness. So let me tell you just a little bit more about our author. He was born in 1929 and grew up in London, England. Now, he has done so many beautiful things in his lifetime, including the national service in the Army. He has received his BA as well as his diploma in education from the University College of Southampton. And in 1953, he lived in the U.S., studying and teaching at the University of Mississippi, or as we like to call it, Ole Miss, and at the University of Minnesota. In 1963, having his master's and his PhD, he was appointed associate professor of English at Amherst. So you know what I am going to tell you now. Go on. Get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee, or get your tea, because we are about to get started. Good morning, and thank you so much, Dr. Richard, for coming on and visiting with us today.
My pleasure.
Now, I love the fact that you have not only decided to be a man of great education and given back to the community by being a professor, but you also have a sense of duty and country, and I love that, serving in military service. Now, what made you decide to go into education? Why was that important to you?
Well, I think it was due chiefly to the influence of my parents, and particularly my mother. They were just an ordinary couple, not themselves educated beyond the school, but ordinary school in around the turn of the last century. But they were devoted to reading, and they were, when I was born, they were both serious Christians, and they simply we read and studied every day.
It is true that our parents can have such a beautiful influence on us when it comes to reading. I know that my mother had a really big influence in just the way that she shared the stories when she read the stories with me. My family, I am one of the few people that I realized had, a study that was filled with beautiful books. That's not a brag, but just an example of how important books really can be, in that you grow up around books and it becomes something that's quite natural, and you have that desire to read what's in those books. I definitely understand. Now, being an author, is that something that came quite naturally for you, getting your idea down into a published work?
That's a good question. I was very much in love with books when I was a schoolboy of the age of 10, when I was old enough to appreciate. I was in love with a book like The Prisoner of Zenda by Anthony Hope, an old-fashioned novel now, and 1894 it came out. But it's a beautiful adventure story, and it's the book that created what we refer to commonly as Ruritania, which is really a fanciful version of the Habsburg Empire of the last century, and it's about England and an Englishman and his experience in this European country. It's a sort of spy story, and but it's very romantic and very serious in the sense that its values are moral and significant, and it has some fascinating characters. And I loved it, and I also there were a lot of other books that I liked too. I mean, there are books like that, plenty of books actually of that kind from that period, and spy stories, John Buchan and the like. And I loved the books, and I tried to own them. I owned them when I could. Certainly, used the library and kept them around whenever I couldn't afford them. And another important influence on me was that my mother was very interested in the work of Jehovah's Witnesses, which had a big reputation when I was a boy, because the leader earlier on in 1914, before 1914, just before, had been wise enough to predict that Armageddon, or the apocalypse, would occur in 1914, according to a prediction that he had worked out from the language of the Bible. And sure enough, it did, and this made his name, it was Russell, very, very common for interested people at that time. And of course, Jehovah's Witnesses still exists and has one sees, they come and call, as they did. They are door-to-door proselytes of the Bible, and I think that my mother was by no means so devoted to this that it seemed to characterize her life. She did a certain amount of witnessing, that is to say, going with one of the friends to visit an interested possible convert or reader, but she was definitely devoted to reading and understanding and knowing herself, and what she referred to as the truth, and the witnesses themselves, they still refer to the truth, they call it. And they are, the one thing you can say for them is that they work endlessly and seriously at the Bible. My own Greek New Testament is a publication of theirs. It's not easy to come by, and I'm grateful to them for that.
Well, we must say that though we may not agree with all bits and pieces of all denominations across the world, that I do admire the fact that with the Jehovah Witness, they do take the Great Commission to be quite literal, and they do go out and try to share what they believe is the good news. So from that, I may have to tip my hat that they do go out and try to do that. Now, let's kind of switch just a little bit, if we will, to your book, The Perfect Witness. I love the title in that it kind of builds a little bit of intrigue. Now, how did you come to your title? Did it come to you first and you wrote your story around, or did you find that the title came out of your writings? How did Perfect Witness come to be?
Well, it's a little complicated. Perfect Witness is not the first novel that I wrote and published to please myself. Really, I didn't expect. I'm not interested in the commercial side of things. At Ex Libris, it was the second book that I wrote, and it was a sequel to a book called Neighboring Eyes, which is a spy story set in England in 19. I published it in 2004, and Ex Libris put it out, and its title had to do with my choosing Perfect Witness as the title of its sequel. Like the novel The Prisoner's Offender that I was referring to as one of my lifetime favorites, it and Perfect Witness and Neighboring Eyes, the first one, are divided between England and a Ruritania. But my Ruritania is called Baltia and is based on the Baltic states, or the real Baltic states that we know, and that have been quite significant in the political history of Europe, for the last, for centuries, but in recent years, certainly. So they've become independent since the 90s, the 1890s.
Absolutely.
Pardon?
And it's so important for someone, especially during that time period, as you mentioned. My grandmother was born in 1907, and being of European descent, we learned very much of the history and why England did the things that they did, and how the United. Now, we have about a minute left in this particular segment, but I want to ask you about your writing process. Do you find that it is one that is relaxing for you? Does it bring about a certain amount of stress, or have you found it to be almost like a spiritual expression, the freedom of being able to write?
Oh, it's very much a spiritual experience for me. I both in the rather obvious, in the usual sense of the word, in the religious sense of the word, certainly. I really think, for me, that books and reading and writing and knowing and being able to quote and so on, all of that is a way to God, and it's God's way to us. God is undoubtedly the Word. Everything from God has come to us in the form of words.
Absolutely. Because in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. I love it. Well, it is time for us to go to break. Well, before we do, Dr. Cody, if you could please, can you remind everyone what is the title of your book, where can we get a copy, and how do people stay in contact with you?
You get a copy from Ex Libris at orders at exlibris.com.
get a copy of the book. We'll be back. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Butts-Chester. My guest today is Dr. Richard Cody, and we're talking about his book, Perfect Witness, Writing and Publishing to Please Oneself. Now, so many times we are writing because we need to get that information out. Sometimes this is a personal desire. It is something that has been on our goals list, and we need to share the information that we have inside. So today we are going to look at the reasons why we write what we write. Now, Dr. Cody, my next question for you is that you chose to write in the genre of fiction. Why did you choose fiction as opposed to nonfiction?
Well, it's as we were saying earlier, my attraction to books goes back to my earliest years as a boy and the continuing influence of my parents. And I simply remembered the pleasure that fiction had given me. Of course, I don't think of the Bible as fiction, and I certainly don't think of books of history and philosophy as
of course.
Fiction. But novels and short stories and poems too, which are sometimes. There are novels in poetry, particularly in the Victorian period, and it was natural to me to do what I enjoyed other people having done, and also I wanted to do it my own way. You know, it's very important to me.
Did you find that by writing fiction, it allowed you to not only express yourself to a certain freedom, but it allowed you to go deeper into your own imagination, to write without limitations, but to be able to explore and share as needed?
I think I'm surprised at how much I have, as it were, come upon, discovered. Yes. Yes, I didn't always. I often didn't know just what I was writing, the story that I was dreaming about. I didn't know what it was or where it was going, but it always went somewhere interesting. And of course, I can work on it the moment I realize what it is, and that has been very true for me. As a matter of fact, what I'm thinking we might speak about briefly at sometime, if not today, is that I'm in the middle of a third volume after Neighbouring Eyes and Perfect Witness, which make a sequel, one set in England and one set in the Baltic states, or Baltia. A third one set in England again, which sort of closes the balance about England, and that.
And allow it to come full circle. I can definitely understand why that would be important to bring it back from whence it began. That's a beautiful way of bringing closure to.
Well, and it made me. I thought I had to do that. You know. I couldn't have. I didn't invent that. That sort of happened while I was doing what I was trying to do.
Now, in your book, Perfect Witness, why was it important for your main character to have the characteristics, to have the personality? Why was it important to be that particular way?
Why was it important? Well, he's it's a part of the concept of the kind of fiction I was writing. I wanted to write. I loved spy stories. I loved adventures as a boy, and I still, as an adult, have read eagerly the many spy novels that have come out in the last century. You know.
We kind of touched on it a little bit earlier when you were saying that writing is definitely a sense of freedom and kind of that spiritual experience, little s, experience for you. But you talk about how people also need to be able to write for one's self. What do you mean by that?
To please oneself, you mean? Yeah, I think that's what I would say. I don't know whether people should do that. I wouldn't be able to advise probably, but for myself, it matters very much for me to feel absolutely free in what I do as a writer, what I say, the way I handle words, and fiction is a choice because it has pleased me so much, and it also because I really think the distinction between fiction and the literal or the factual or the truth is often the difference is not very great.
Now, when you are writing, do you find that you need to be away from everyone else? Do you need a quiet place to write?
Oh yes, I have to be. Yes, in fact, yes, absolutely, and it's a constant difficulty to, and it makes one selfish in the family life. It makes one selfish, you know, and I have to be careful about that, since my wife and I are both in our later years now, and we need one another's care.
Yes. And you know, you are very correct in that, Dr. Cody. I think that many times people forget that when you are married to a spouse that has a particular career path, that there are those sacrifices that have to be made. That perhaps you sacrifice seeing them for the hours in which you would like, but you understand that they're working on their craft. They are writing a book, and it may not last forever, but in that moment, the sacrifice is,
or even just studying a subject, you know, reading. My wife is a very busy member of two women's study groups in our Episcopal Church in where we live in Anniston, and she's always composing something.
Yes.
But and I need to, and certainly that we have to find time for that. And she's been very generous to me. She's my, as I say, she's my amanuensis. I dedicated the first volume, Perfect Neighboring Eyes, to her. And
how beautiful!
And with the dedication, sine qua non, which without whom not.
That's right.
Meaning indispensable, because she has helped me tremendously by making makes the draft for me. She wants to read it, and she's happy to read it and improve it if she can. Not intrusively, but she catch my errors, catch my weaknesses, and give me an opinion. She's my first reader,
But there's a beauty in having a spouse that is able to deliver truth to you in a way that is constructive as opposed to being destructive. You can tell someone that perhaps they need to change a few words is much more gentle than saying this stinks, in a harsh way to tear someone down. So having a spouse that is able to share that with you, you are most correct in that, Dr. Cody.
She's very good important. At that. Yes, I'm very fortunate in that respect. That's certainly true. A way in which we've both been unfortunate is that in the last five years and so or more, we've both come into old age. We're both over 90, and she's become a subject, a victim of the condition that's called shingles.
Oh yes, quite.
That is very new. Is a neural condition that is very painful, and she simply has to spend a lot of time trying to control the pain, and because there is no cure.
No cure at all. Mm-hmm.
And she's also had pharyngeal cancer, which was successfully treated, but that's all in that facial area, the head and forehead, and that shingles attacks, and she's just not been able to
do her usual functions,
to do as much as she. So I've had to forget for a year or two. I've had to forget about closing the door and not appearing until dinner time, I've had to go and get the shopping.
Just a little bit of a role reversal there for just a bit.
Certainly.
Well, as someone who is a cancer survivor, I do understand the ups and downs and the rounds and rounds and the side effects and the things that you have to deal with in order to become as well as you can be dealing with any illness and disease. So my prayers will definitely be out for her.
Thank you.
Especially during those outbreaks, they are nothing that anyone would wish.
Oh dear, it's frightening. Yes. Sometimes it's frightening how severe they are. Strange too, because they come and go,
Just like that, like you almost just wake up with it, and you know that, oh dear, I'm gonna have an outbreak in a few days. The visual, the manifestation of the shingle will occur in a few days, and it is nothing that you wish upon anyone. I do have a few loved ones that are dealing with it in different places on their body, but nonetheless, the pain is just something that you hold their hands and just kind of help them get through it as best you can.
Please hold my hand, yes.
But I love how you speak very lovingly of her, and even in those moments when she is not at her best, you are together, you are still able to be your best as a couple through that. And that speaks a lot about who the two of you are, and how your faith has made you become the couple that you are today. I love it. I love spending time with those who are members of our greatest generation. So thank you so much for spending time with us today and inspiring, enlightening, and empowering those who have listened. Dr. Richard Cody, author of Perfect Witness, and the book is available, of course, on Ex Libris. And again, thank you, Dr. Cody, for being a guest on Daily Spark with me today.
It's my pleasure, and especially to hear all that you've had to say and your understanding of our subject.
Absolutely. Thank you again. Thank you for tuning in and spending time with us again today. As always, may the Lord continue to shine his face upon you. May you receive his grace and his mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, remember that you are blessed in the Lord. Have a great day, everyone.